This design calls for some paving running between a grass-lawned area and an entertaining area. Embedded into the paving are some custom stepping stones. So we need to delineate this zone and then hatch the zone. What I've done is to use the line command, and I've picked up the end of this line here. And to put the very first line in, it's perpendicular to that circle. So you can see the value of these entity snaps that are over to the right. You might find it useful to float the entity snap toolbar and put it maybe at the top of the screen like so. You might find those a little easier to reach. We want another line running from the edge of the paver here, perpendicular to that circle. So the same applies. Line, pick up the end point of that line and we'll go perpendicular to. So we need the perpendicular entity snap option there. So that's two of the lines that define this area that we're going to hatch. And we need another line here. So it's draw line. And I want to pick up from the quadrant of that circle and I want to go vertically up. So I'm going to put snap and grid on at this point, and my grid setting is 100 millimeters. So I'll go back to draw the line. This time to pick up that point there, I'm going to use a different entity snap option. It's the grip option, this one here. So pick it up, that snaps to the quadrant of the circle, and I can just move up in a vertical direction, and that will automatically lock onto the grid. We can repeat the line command again. Pick up our grid, pick up our grip option and then move in that direction up. So the green lines I'm drawing over the top of my red lines. So now we've got this area delineated. How then to create an area that can be hatched? A closed polyline is used for hatching. Let me demonstrate first by drawing a polyline. I'll just arbitrarily draw a shape like so, and then I'll right-click and close it. So when I select that shape, it's up here in the properties box. It's referred to as a polyline. A polyline of one entity, but closed in this instance. I can draw hatch, and the prompt says select the object. When I do that and right-click, up pops a hatch pattern selector, and I can pick any one of a lot of different hatch patterns, but I'm choosing parallel lines, and I'll set a scale of 100. 100 scale means nothing. It's not 100 millimeters apart. It's just an arbitrary scale, and I'll pick OK. And as you can see, the area gets hatched. So there's the hatch pattern gone into that space. So let's eliminate both that hatch pattern. So what we need to do is to create a polyline around that very complex shape. So how do we do it? We draw a polyline. Where are we going to start? We'll start at this point here, so we can use the entity snap end, and we go perpendicular to. I'll assume that my shapes are not there, perpendicular to the circle. So we've got the first of our polyline in. Now if I need to bring an arc around like so. Right click and go arc, and it's worthwhile recalling or remembering that gCADPlus draws its arcs anti-clockwise. So I'm going to pick up the grip, the quadrant of that circle. Don't worry at the moment that the arc's not in the correct position. Now I need to right-click, because as you can see, the software is trying to draw another arc. Right-click and say, no, I'm going back to the line option. So snap is on, so I can get to perpendicular to that line would do, perpendicular to that line there, or go straight up. I think I'd be inclined to go straight up. I've gone a little bit too far, so there's an undo option. right click, undo. Didn't quite go in the point that I want to. That's the point that I need. Now comes a slightly tricky bit. We need to draw our shape leaves to curve around. Now these are not arcs through here, that's a fitted curve. So we use this a tiny bit tedious, we use this nearest option to say near and near. So I'm just picking up the polyline curve that we put previously. It's a little bit confusing here. I should really have eliminated the hatch pattern and my red line. So I'll actually do that. I'll finish at this point, enter. I'll get rid of our hatching, and I'll get rid of the red closed polyline, and now I can continue with the draw polyline. I can pick up the end where we were before. Now I'll take off the grid to make it a little easier for you to see. So we're just tracing around a shape that ultimately we're going to hatch. And I'm using the nearest option, and I'm not taking too much trouble because we can always adjust things later. But this green line that I'm currently drawing ultimately will be removed, and we'll just leave the hatching in position. So I don't need to be terribly fussy about this series here. And I can come there and then to an end point of the green line that I drew. Now we need to go into arc mode again, so it's right click and arc, and I can pick up my previous point as an end point. One more, whoops, right click and go into line mode, one more to there, and then because I started at that point, I'll pick up that as the end point and right click and enter. So now I have two polylines, this one that we just drew and the first one. Both are now selected, right click and join. Now comes the fun part. We've got an arc. You can see we pick the arc within the polyline and just move the arc like so, and pick this one and move it to indicate the shape that you want. There is a polyline. Now it can be hatched. So it's draw, hatch. Should have gone draw, hatch. The prompt says select the objects. Would have worked the way we were doing it. And then OK. And there's our hatched zone. Now that's been hatched with parallel lines. Just imagine we want a sort of pebble paving in that area with some embedded steppers in the pebble paving. We'd want to change that hatch pattern. So we can delete it. You could also edit it later, but let's draw a hatch pattern and pick up our shape, right click, and see if we can pick up some sort of dots pattern would do, or even you might be using a sort of random dot and stone pattern may well work for you. So let's OK that. And it appears not to have worked, but when I select, you might just be able to see, I'll take snap off, if I pick that little dot that's in there, up pops the hatch. So my scale is just a little bit too large, so let's come back to a scale of 10, and there you see our hatch pattern running through there. You might want to put that hatch pattern to the back so that it goes underneath the paving bricks, and to do that, select it and go Tools, Draw Order, and send it to the back. So now the hatch pattern's right at the back. Now I mentioned before that we can eliminate that green line now. The hatch pattern is in, so we get a nice clean effect. We'd need, I think, to trim these off to make it look neat. So let's modify and trim. That can be the cutting edge, and we'll knock off that little bit of the line through there. And I'd forgotten we did have a red line through there, so repeat trim. This is the cutting edge, and we'll pick those off. And there we have our zone. So you might, I think we've got a green line here on top of a red line, and a green line here on top of a red line as well. So there's our area that is going to be have some sort of paving in it that's relatively uniform, and embedded in it are our paving bricks. So that's a little tricky and an important tool to understand when you're learning CAD drafting, is the use of this polyline command.